My connection to a life I never knew was woven into the threads of a simple cotton shawl, but to the colleagues at my dream job, it was nothing more than a punchline. They couldn't have known that their casual cruelty was the first tremor of an earthquake that would shatter their world and unearth a secret buried so deep. It had been waiting for me my entire life. My first week was a waking nightmare, not because of the demanding work, but because the very people I hoped to impress saw my heritage as a joke. The laughter began as a poisonously quiet whisper in the sterile, glass-walled boardroom, then grew into a chorus of open snickering. In that moment, I wasn't just a designer giving a presentation. I was a ghost, an outsider, a relic to be mocked. They saw a strange woman in a strange cloth, but they were blind. They had no idea who they were truly laughing at, and they could never have imagined that the judge who would one day preside over their downfall was bound to that same piece of cloth by a secret that would change everything. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. It helps. Lot.my name, Aisha Thompson, is a map of my fractured identity. Aisha was the name whispered to me in an orphanage in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, a place I have no memory of. Thompson was the gift of a loving, kind white family from a sleepy Ohio suburb who adopted me when I was 5. John and Mary Thompson became my world. They are, and always will be, my parents. They built me a fortress of safety, gave me an education they worked tirelessly to afford, and wrapped me in an unconditional love that I never, for a single moment, doubted. They gave me everything, yet a small, hollow chamber remained in my heart, echoing with questions that had no answers. Who were the parents who gave me life? Whose face did I see when I looked in the mirror? What was my life before the orphanage, before the quiet streets of Ohio? Growing up, my reflection was a constant reminder of my otherness. I was the only black child in my school, on my street, in my world. My parents, bless their hearts, tried so desperately to bridge the gap. They organized cultural nights, their loving but clumsy attempts at making injera and doro what filling the kitchen with strange, unfamiliar smells. They bought me brightly colored traditional garments they found on the internet, which I wore with a mixture of love for their effort and the awkward feeling of wearing a costume. It was all a beautiful, well-intentioned replica of a life, like looking at a diorama in a museum. Close but not the real thing. The single solitary artifact from my past, the only thing that felt truly mine, was a delicate white cotton shawl. Netala. It had come with me from Ethiopia, a final gift from a life I couldn't access. The nuns at the orphanage told my parents it was found wrapped around me as an infant. It was my only tangible link to a mother who was just a phantom in my dreams. The shawl's soft fabric was embroidered with an intricate border of red and gold thread, and it carried a faint, lingering scent of old paper and an exotic spice I could never place. Whenever I held it to my face, burying myself in its folds, I felt a faint, fleeting whisper of belonging, a ghost of a lullaby. Years of relentless hard work, of pouring my soul into my art, finally paid off. I landed my dream job. Senior graphic designer at Sterling Creative, one of Chicago's most prestigious advertising agencies. The office itself was a testament to success. All gleaming glass walls and polished concrete floors, simultaneously intimidating and exhilarating. This was it. This was my chance to finally prove that I belonged in a world of high-stakes creativity, that my talent alone was enough to earn my place. On my first day, I carefully folded the netala and tucked it into my bag. I had no intention of wearing it, not yet. But having it close felt like carrying a secret piece of ancestral armor, a silent source of strength. The first few weeks were a dizzying whirlwind of tight deadlines, brainstorming sessions, and the pressure to perform. I buried myself in my work, fueled by coffee and a burning desire to impress. Then the opportunity one had been waiting for arrived. a massive, career-defining pitch for a flagship client. I was assigned a key section of the presentation. This was my moment to shine, to prove I wasn't just a diversity hire, but a creative force. The night before the pitch, anxiety coiled in my stomach like a serpent. Imposter syndrome, that familiar crippling voice of doubt, screamed in my mind. You don't belong here. You're going to fail. I paced my apartment, my breath catching in my chest. I needed an anchor. My gaze fell upon the nettola, draped gracefully over a chair, its white fabric glowing in the lamplight. I thought of the faceless woman who might have wrapped me in it. Was she strong? Was she a fighter? Would she be proud of me in this moment? That morning I made a conscious, deliberate choice. I wasn't going to hide. I put on my best armor. A sharp navy blue blouse, a perfectly tailored skirt, and heels that made me feel powerful. Then, as the final touch, I took a deep breath and draped the nettola over my shoulders. The soft cotton felt like a comforting embrace, a tangible connection to the ancestors I never knew. It felt like I was honoring them as I stepped into this pivotal moment of my future. For the first time all night, I felt centered, confident, and utterly ready. I walked into that boardroom feeling like I was walking on air. The partners were assembled, along with my boss, David, and the entire creative team. I smiled, launched my presentation, and for the first 5 minutes, I was soaring. I saw nods of approval, impressed glances. Had them. And then the world tilted on its axis. It began with Karen, a senior account executive with a reputation for being ruthlessly ambitious. I saw her lean over to a colleague, a condescending smirk twisting her lips. A loud, exaggerated snort broke the professional silence. I faltered for a second, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. I tried to regain my footing to push through, but then another person chuckled. Quiet, stifled sound. And then another, louder this time. Within seconds, a ripple of cruel, unrestrained laughter spread through the room. It wasn't just a giggle. It was a wave of mockery directed squarely at me. A hot flush of shame crept up my neck, my blood turning to ice. I glanced down at the beautiful, embroidered border of my shawl. They were laughing at my shawl. Me. Is that a Halloween costume? Someone whispered, far too loudly to be mistaken for a private comment. Looks like she grabbed a tablecloth on the way out, Karen added, her voice dripping with a venom that was meant to be heard. The room, which moments before had been my stage, had transformed into a cage. The air crackled with their derision. In their eyes, I was no longer a talented designer. I was a freak, a sideshow. The laughter wasn't just about a piece of cloth. It was about my otherness, my history, my very identity. The beautiful, sacred link to my past was just a cheap joke to them. My voice, once so confident, evaporated. The words on the presentation screen blurred into an incomprehensible jumble. I just stood there, frozen in a spotlight of humiliation, as the echoes of their laughter bounced off the cold, sterile walls. My boss, David, simply cleared his throat, a pathetic, cowardly sound. "All right, let's refocus," he mumbled, his eyes darting anywhere but at me. He didn't defend me. He didn't stop them. He just let the humiliation hang in the air, thick and suffocating, a poison that choked the rest of my presentation into a train wreck. The rest of that day passed in a haze of profound shame. The overt laughter had subsided, but it was replaced by something worse. The lingering stares, the conspiratorial whispers that ceased the moment I approached, the pitying glances that felt more like judgment. I felt like a child again, back on that elementary school playground, the odd one out, the target. I had spent my entire adult life building a fortress of professionalism, believing that my talent would be my shield. I was devastatingly wrong. The next morning, with a knot of dread in my stomach, I walked into the HR department. I sat in a cold, minimalist chair across from a manager with a practiced, plastic smile and recounted the entire incident. I explained the public mockery, the deep humiliation, and the cultural significance of my netala. I expected, at the very least, a shred of empathy. What I received was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. Aisha, the HR manager began, her tone dripping with condescension. We pride ourselves on a very expressive and informal company culture here at Sterling. Are you quite sure you aren't being a little oversensitive? The team loves to joke around. It's how they bond. Perhaps you should try to be more of a team player. I walked out of that office feeling utterly and completely erased. The message was brutally clear. My culture was not welcome, my feelings were invalid, and I was the problem for not quietly accepting the abuse. After that meeting, the harassment escalated, becoming a quiet, insidious campaign of 1,000 paper cuts. My project files would mysteriously become corrupted hours before a deadline. I'd be conveniently left off critical email chains, only to be blamed for not being up to speed in meetings. In brainstorming sessions, Karen would make pointed jokes about ethnic fashion or wearing your curtains to work, always followed by a challenging smirk in my direction. My dream job had become a high-stress prison. Sleep offered no escape, as nightmares of the laughing boardroom replayed on a loop. My work, once my pride, began to suffer under the weight of the sabotage and my own crushing anxiety. I began to dread the sunrise. One night, after discovering an entire week's worth of complex design work had been accidentally deleted from the server, I came home and simply collapsed onto the floor, sobbing in exhausted frustration. My eyes fell on the netala, the beautiful, hated source of all this misery. In a fit of anger, I snatched it up, ready to shove it into a box in the back of my closet, to bury the pain it represented. But as my fingers clenched the fabric, I felt something strange, a hard, tiny, unfamiliar lump in the thick embroidered border. It was a pocket, stitched with such immaculate precision that in all my years of treasuring it, I'd never once noticed. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. With trembling, clumsy hands, I worked the tight threads loose. Inside, nestled within the cotton, was a tiny, perfectly folded piece of aged paper. It was a faded photograph of a breathtakingly beautiful Ethiopian woman, her eyes full of a fierce love, holding a baby. Holding me. On the back, written in elegant Amharic script, were a few words. In that instant everything shifted. This wasn't just a shawl. It was a message. Legacy. And the woman in that photo, my mother. She did not look like someone who would want her daughter to be broken by the ignorant cruelty of bullies. A fire I thought had been extinguished roared back to life within me. This was no longer about a job. This was about my mother's memory. This was about my right to exist, fully and without apology. The next day I didn't go to work. I went to a lawyer, a woman who specialized in employment discrimination. For the first time since it all began, I felt a flicker of hope. I told her the entire story, from the first snicker to the deleted files. I told her about the gaslighting in HR, the constant sabotage. I showed her the photograph. When I finally finished, she looked at me not with pity, but with a grim, steely resolve. "Aisha," she said, her voice low and firm, "this is a classic case of a hostile work environment based on your national origin. They didn't just laugh at a piece of clothing. They attacked you for being different, for not being one of them. We're going to make them answer for it." Hearing that validation felt like taking a full, clean breath after being held underwater for months. We filed the lawsuit. If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone. The months leading up to the trial were a brutal war of attrition. Sterling Creative's team of high-priced lawyers did everything in their power to bury us, filing endless motions and painting me as an incompetent, disgruntled employee who couldn't handle office banter. But my lawyer Maria was a bulldog. She relentlessly deposed every single person from that meeting, and through her sharp questioning, she unearthed a disturbing pattern of similar behavior, of promotions denied and careers stifled for anyone who didn't fit their homogeneous mold. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. I sat in the cold, imposing courtroom, the polished wood seeming to absorb all the warmth from the room. My hands were clenched so tightly in my lap my knuckles were white. Across the room I saw them. Karen, my boss David, and the agency partners, their faces set in masks of pure contempt. Karen caught my eye and let a slow, confident smirk spread across her face. A clear message. You are going to lose. I took a deep, shaky breath and secretly touched the photograph in my pocket, drawing strength from the woman I'd never met. Their defense was exactly as predictable and insulting as we'd anticipated. It was all just light-hearted office banter. I was hypersensitive and lacked a sense of humor. Then it was my turn to take the stand. As I walked to the witness box, my heart hammered against my ribs, but I imagined I wasn't just speaking for myself. I was speaking for the woman in the photo. I looked at the jury and I told them what the Nettela meant to me, not as a garment, but as my only connection to my past. I described the sound of their laughter, the specific, cruel timbre of it, and how it felt like an act of complete and total erasure. I detailed every instance of sabotage, every dismissive HR meeting, every smirk and whisper that followed. I spoke my truth, my voice growing stronger and clearer with every word. Throughout my testimony, I was intensely aware of the judge. She was an older African-American woman, Judge Elena Vasquez, a name that commanded respect in the legal community. She had eyes that seemed to see right through every lie, every pretense. She listened to every word, her face an unreadable mask of judicial impartiality. But I felt her gaze on me, and it wasn't pity. It was something else, something I couldn't name. An unnerving intensity. The moment that blew the entire case wide open came from nowhere. As Sterling's lead lawyer was strutting through his closing arguments, confidently dismissing my entire experience, Judge Vasquez held up a single hand. The room fell instantly silent. "Counsel," she said, her voice calm but resonating with an undeniable power that silenced all objections before they could even be formed. "I have listened to all the testimony, and I find that further discovery is not only warranted but necessary." She turned her sharp gaze on Sterling's legal team, whose confident expressions had vanished. "Effective immediately, I am ordering a full, independent audit of Sterling Creative's hiring, promotion, and termination practices for the last 10 years. Auditors appointed by this court will have full and unrestricted access to all your records." The defense lawyers shot to their feet, sputtering objections, but Judge Vasquez wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she continued, her voice dropping, becoming strangely personal, "this case at its very core is about more than a hostile workplace. It is about identity. It is about roots." She looked directly at me then, and for a fleeting, breathtaking second, her judicial mask slipped. In her eyes, I saw a deep, ancient sadness that mirrored the hollow place in my own heart. There are elements within the sealed adoption records, submitted by the plaintiff's counsel as part of the background file, that this court finds compelling. The entire room held its breath. Therefore, under the court's broad discretionary power, I am making a second and highly unusual order. The tension was a physical thing, thick and unbearable. I am ordering a sealed, court-supervised DNA comparison to be conducted. Murmurs erupted into a roar of confusion. Even Maria stared at me, her eyes wide with bewilderment. Judge Vasquez raised her voice, cutting through the chaos. The comparison will be made between the plaintiff, Ms. Aisha Thompson. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was screaming. And myself, Judge Elena Vasquez. The courtroom absolutely detonated. The gavel slammed down again and again, a futile drumbeat against the tidal wave of pure, unadulterated shock. Karen's smug face had melted into a grotesque mask of disbelief. David looked like he was about to faint. And I just sat there, my mind spinning into a vortex of impossibility, staring at the woman on the bench who had just irrevocably connected our lives with a single, earth-shattering command. The aftermath was pure chaos. My private case exploded into a media sensation overnight. Judge Vasquez immediately and properly recused herself from the case, citing the now monumental conflict of interest, but her powerful orders remained in effect. The court-appointed auditors descended upon Sterling Creative like a conquering army, and what they unearthed was a deep, pervasive rot of systemic discrimination. My case wasn't an anomaly. It was the predictable outcome of their toxic corporate culture. The firm's sterling reputation was irrevocably tarnished, shattered in a matter of days. While that public storm raged, I was lost in my own private tempest. I had submitted my DNA sample in a daze, my mind reeling, unable to process the impossible possibility. Who was Judge Elena Vasquez? I dove into research, discovering she was a legal legend, a trailblazer for women of color, known for her sharp mind and unwavering ethics. She was also intensely private, with no publicly known family or children. The only personal detail I could find, a tiny biographical note, was that she was originally from Ohio. The wait for the DNA results was the most profound agony I have ever known, a week spent suspended between a lifetime of questions and an answer I couldn't dare to hope for. A week later, a call came from the court clerk's office. Judge Vasquez requests a private meeting with you in her chambers. The next day, I walked into her chambers on trembling legs. The room was filled with law books and accolades, but it felt strangely personal. She wasn't seated behind her imposing desk. She stood by the large window overlooking the city, her back to me, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I could have imagined. "Aisha," she said softly, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't hide. "Please sit down." On the low table between our chairs was a single, sealed manila envelope. The results. 38 years ago, she began, her voice trembling as she turned to face me. I wasn't a judge. I was a very young, very scared law student at a prestigious university. I was in a relationship with a foreign student, a man my strict, traditional family did not approve of. I became pregnant. She took a deep, shaky breath, her composure crumbling. I was pressured by everyone. They said it would ruin my life, my career. They convinced me to give the baby up for a closed adoption. They told me it was the only way to ensure she would have a good life, a life better than I could provide. Her eyes filled with tears that she didn't wipe away. To make sure the adoption was completely untraceable so my family would never find out, I went through an international agency. It was the greatest, most profound regret of my life. Tears were now streaming down her face. Years later, when I was established and secure, I tried to find her. But the records were sealed. The international agency had dissolved. I was told my daughter was gone forever, lost to the system. She looked directly into my eyes, and in their depths I saw my own. When I read your case file, I saw you were adopted from Addis Ababa. The dates aligned perfectly. And then I saw the photograph of the shawl. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That shawl belonged to my grandmother. I wrapped my daughter in it myself on the last day I ever held her. I prayed that it would somehow keep her safe and warm. Her voice finally broke. I had to know, Aisha. Seeing you stand in my courtroom, seeing that strength in you. I had to take that 1 in a billion chance. She pushed the envelope across the table toward me. I already know what it says. I felt it in my soul the moment you walked into my courtroom. My hand shook so violently I could barely open the envelope. I scanned past the scientific jargon, my eyes searching for the one sentence that would change my world. There it was at the bottom of the page in stark, clinical black and white. The probability of maternity is 99.9999%. I looked up from the paper, into the face that had haunted my every dream, the face I now recognized as my own. The word felt both foreign and holy on my tongue. Mother! A sob tore from her chest, a sound of 38 years of pain and hope released at once. My daughter, she wept, reaching across the table for my hands. My long-lost daughter. The powerful, imposing judge was gone. All that was left in that room was a mother who had finally, impossibly, found her child. We sat in that quiet chamber for hours, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside as we pieced together the fragments of our two separate lives. Her name was Elena, and she was my mother. I told her everything, about the Thompsons, about my happy but always incomplete childhood in Ohio, about the constant nagging feeling of being unfinished. The Netala, the very object that had caused me so much pain and humiliation, had been a beacon all along, a thread of destiny patiently pulling us back together across decades and continents. The legal case resolved itself with astonishing speed. Facing the damning results of the audit and a public relations nightmare of their own making, Sterling Creative settled for a massive, undisclosed sum. But the money was never the real victory. The real victory was the change that followed. The company was forced to completely restructure its leadership and its policies. Karen, David, and several others involved were fired. New, rigorously inclusive hiring and workplace conduct policies were put in place. The cruel laughter had been silenced by justice. But my reward was so much greater than justice. I got my past, my history, my identity. The hollow part of my heart began to fill. My wonderful adoptive parents, John and Mary, were shocked, then completely, unconditionally overjoyed. They flew to Chicago and met Elena. I watched, my heart overflowing, as my two families, my two worlds came together. There was no awkwardness, no jealousy. Only a shared, overwhelming love for me. They weren't my adoptive parents and my birth mother anymore. They were all just my parents. My life today is completely unrecognizable from what it was. I left Sterling Creative and, with the seed money from the settlement and the guidance of my brilliant mother, I started my own graphic design firm. One built on a foundation of respect, inclusion, and a celebration of diversity. My relationship with Elena is still new, a delicate and beautiful thing we are nurturing every day. We have a lifetime of catching up to do, and every new story, every shared memory, is a priceless gift. I am no longer just Aisha Thompson. I am Aisha Vasquez Thompson. I am the daughter of a trailblazing judge who moved mountains to find me, and I am the daughter of the kind, gentle couple who gave me the world when I had nothing. I still have the Netala. It's not tucked away in a drawer anymore. It's professionally framed and hangs in the main hallway of my home. A piece of art, a family heirloom, a symbol of my impossible journey. It stands for my Ethiopian roots, for my mother's enduring love, and for the strength I found within myself when I was tested. Some people looked at it and saw only a piece of cloth to ridicule. But they were blind. They couldn't see the history stitched into its seams or the destiny woven into its threads. My colleagues laughed at my clothes, but their laughter didn't break me. It brought me back to my mother, back to my name, and back to myself. And now, I wear my heritage not as something to be tolerated, but as a crown. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.